Hello YouTube, it's DasGregor, and thank you for tuning in for another Linux distribution review. This week we'll be looking at openSUSE 12.3. You're now looking at the current desktop. It has, of course, their gecko that they have plastered everywhere for SUSE, and of course they've been branded everywhere with SUSE at their start bar and in their little Windows gadget here. And without further ado, we'll bring everything up and start our review. Now, for many years I thought SUSE was named SUSE because it is a German distribution and SUSE means sweet, and let me tell you, SUSE is a sweet distribution. I used it back in 2001-2004 as my main desktop, and then that's when I switched over to Gentoo. But I still used it for many years on my server box as the operating system until one day I said, you know what, I don't need a GUI in my server box. I pretty much just need command line interface and something basic, and that would free up a lot of overhead, so I rebuilt my server in Gentoo and just had it all running with secure shell and command line interface. But for many years I used SUSE. It was great. Now, as I said, I always thought SUSE meant it was for sweet. But as it states here in their history, SUSE actually stands for Gesellschaft für Software- und Systementwicklung. And if you look at that, that is Software- und Systementwicklung, SUSE. And it says here that they've always been known as SUSE. Now, some people may say SUSE, some may say SUSE, but I will always pronounce it SUSE because it reminds me of sweet. In fact, back in the day, I wanted to name my daughter after this distribution, being a Linux geek. So I wanted to name my daughter SUSE, and I thought, okay, well, what if we have a boy? And back then I was using Mandrake a lot, so I said, there we go. If it's a boy, his name's Mandrake, and if it's a girl, her name is SUSE. Needless to say, I was vetoed. Nobody wanted me to name our children after Linux distributions. So, they're not. But every once in a while I think about it. Anyway, getting on with SUSE. SUSE is a distribution that has been bought by the corporation Novell in 2004. It is more towards a Linux Enterprise edition, and they have allowed for us users to still get some of the goodies through openSUSE, which is at the openSUSE.org. You ask, why am I talking about that? And you see, that's where one of my pet peeves about Linux distributions and where I'm coming from with this is that corporations sometimes get too big, and when other corporations get involved that their main focus is on money, making money, then they forget about their love for the project. Linux has been more about people who have wanted to build applications just for the sake of building them and keeping them with the whole FOSS philosophy of being free and open source. SUSE is one of the only distributions I actually ever paid for. I always try to support distributions that I use, whether that be through donations or if I think that they're well worth it, giving them money to use their distribution. Otherwise, I'll buy t-shirts, coffee mugs, hats, all kinds of cool things. As I said in my midweek review, I was wearing one of my Slackware shirts from way back when. I even have a SUSE cap, a Gentoo polo. I've got all kinds of different things out there because I like to support the open source developer. In fact, when I was first getting into Linux and I was having problems with video editing, a Swiss fellow came to me one time through the internet and said he had built an application, and I went and looked at it, and he showed me how to get it and install it, and it worked really well, and I used it for a long time. And to thank him, I saw on his page that he had an Amazon account and he had a wish list, so I went there, found some things that were on his wish list towards the top of the list, bought them for him, and had them shipped to Switzerland through Amazon. One day he wakes up, finds a shipment on his door with a thank you note for developing, and I know it's not much, but I do try to give back that way. And it's great that when corporations do kind of decide that that's the direction they're going to go, that they still leave certain applications available for us users, such as openSUSE for SUSE, Fedora for Red Hat. I guess that's one of the big reasons why I'm not happy with the direction that Ubuntu has gone. They have a heart, I think, for open source, but they're just completely forgetting the end user and what they think is more beneficial instead of what their pocketbook thinks is beneficial for them. SUSE is very stable. It works very well. There's almost nothing I can say poorly about this distribution. Everything is great. Everything seems to run really well. They do have their own setup tool. It's called Yast, yet another setup tool. I'll bring that up real quick. Let me just go ahead and minimize that for now, and we'll bring up Yast, and it should be in the utilities area. I was in the other, there we go. I was in the other setup, and I did the video, and for some reason something hiccuped. I thought I didn't have sound. I blew it away, then realized caffeine was just giving me problems. So this is take 2. I'm trying to remember everything I went through the first time. You know how that is. Yast is Gentoo's proprietary setup. It has pretty much an expanded view of everything that you're ever going to find within, say, the control panel or system settings. You're going to have your add-ons, media check, online update. They do a very good job with that. Software management, software repositories, all your hardware, system information, etc., etc. It's all found here in Yast. Very easy to configure, very easy to get into. And that brings me to the install of SUSE. SUSE comes on a live DVD of a specific flavor, or you can just get an installation DVD of 4.7 gigs that has pretty much everything to get you basically going. It's all GUI. It boots up. Everything works really well. 2 problems I ran into, and they're very minor. One is just paying attention to detail. SUSE wanted out of the box to set up a home partition as well as a root partition, and because of this, if I had not been paying attention, I would have wiped out my primary partition that I just got set up working well again with Gentoo. And so luckily I saw that and was able to say, no, do not create a home partition. I want only my guest OS to be on SDB4, and my swap partition, of course, be where it's at. So I had to pay attention to that, got that fixed. I mean, that's always the nerve-wracking part whenever I'm throwing a distribution, is paying attention that I don't screw up and throw in the wrong partition number and go wiping and installing on the wrong area. It's just something you have to pay attention to. The other thing that I ran into was SUSE likes to try to do an update before it actually logs into the system for the first time, and I could not get my wireless to work at all within the system. It would see my wireless and it would see my network, but for some reason it just wouldn't connect the two. And probably because I used encryption and all that, and they probably didn't have the encryption programs compiled or set up to run inside of their GUI interface. Not a showstopper at all. You just don't do the updates. You go ahead and boot into the system. Everything works great. Up comes the update, and it was a long install to install everything, because I just said, you know what, give me it all. Let me have it all. Let me see it. install as much as you can. So it did take about 30 or 45 minutes to install everything. But the sad thing was, after I got done installing all that, the system update kicked in, and there was another 35-40 minutes of downloading about a gig more of data and installing it. Now, there are user license agreements that you have to sign, and I think it's kind of goofy that there's all this legal mumbo jumbo when you're loading up SUSE, that you agree to their EULA. It's like, for most distributions, you don't have to sign a EULA. It's free, open source. You're supposed to do whatever you want with the software, but because this is SUSE and it does have some proprietary stuff in there, you do have to be careful what you're sharing. Plus, everything about SUSE is what you call branded, which means it has their name on there. It's not just the open source non-branded version of the software. Everything's got its own little branding there, so you have to watch out for that. Also, because it's a corporation, it's got to watch out for what codecs they give you. And they talk about, well, it's best to try to find all the codecs for the free stuff. But let's face it, people, when you have an MP4 you want to play, when you have, other media, MP3 for instance, you want to play, there aren't any open source codecs that are completely free that you can use. So you have to go through their whole spiel of, hey, you're going to install some bad stuff here. We're not liable. Yeah, so be it. If I'm more impressed with being able to play my media than I am about this whole thing. I don't want to ever put illegal software on my system. I'm very picky. If you're going to do something, say in Microsoft, buy the product, buy the application. Don't go ripping somebody off. Give the credit where it's due and pay for it. But when it comes to codecs and things like that, I'm surprised they haven't just come out and said, you know what, for $1.50 you can buy the codecs, all these proprietary ones. And that brings me to another. The purist Linux user versus, say, the casual Linux user. The purist Linux user, and if you're one of those and you're watching this video, I don't mean to offend you, but there are some out there that believe everything about Linux ought to be open source. You got to have the code, no closed source drivers, no closed source software. Everything should be open, available, free, full disclosure. Well, that's all good until you have a laptop like I have, which has to use the IWL Wi-Fi adapter, and I have to use an IWL Ucode 600 firmware, which is closed source, just to be able to get that to work. I tried a distro a couple months ago that was free like that. I couldn't get my wireless to work at all. And without wireless, I can't get updates. Without updates, I can't get the software I want. So I'm stuck with just what they give me. I'm okay with closed source on Linux if it allows me to do my job, what I want to do. For instance, for the longest time, there's that whole battle about playing a DVD, or nowadays even a Blu-ray, on your Linux box, because the software to decrypt the DVD and the Blu-ray is closed source, and there's no, official package that you can get to do this. That's ridiculous. I mean, I know there's libcss, there's all kinds of DVD reader stuff you can install to make it work. All the other distributions, a lot of them have it set up out of the box that it works. Systems like this, though, don't have that working. I do believe Flash worked out of the box. I think that was one of the few things that it did work with no issues. But all the extra codecs, I had to agree to lots of stuff and then install, I think, another repository and get everything from there so that I could get a lot of the codecs to work and see if the games work. Now, that ramble said, everything else about SUSE is great. Everything's pretty much standard. It comes with a standard kicker, standard KDE, everything else. It has their own little information, the way it's all set up with their own color scheme that they use. But outside of that, everything is what you're expecting to see. The development, software package, education, games, graphics. I'm not going to go through most of these because you're familiar with most all of them. It's all the simple, same KDE. There's really nothing in the application side that screams, I'm SUSE, I'm only SUSE, except for maybe Yast. and there might be some other stuff, and that might be because this is the openSUSE flavor, and they're trying to keep it as pure and virgin as possible and keep it out of the corporate stuff, because that's where they're going to make their money, is through the corporation side. It's very stable. It's worked really well. I've had it for about a week. No big issues. GUVC worked really well. It's one of the first times that I was able to install Simple Screen Recorder without having to compile it from code. I actually found a package for it within one of the repositories to install that. I was able to also get Chromium. I don't remember if that came standard or if that was, I'm thinking I installed it myself just to try stuff. It came with Firefox, of course. And one thing about Chromium, and I just want to show you this real quick, I found this in one of the other distributions that I had looked at a couple months ago. It was UberStudent, and I thought this was the coolest thing. I love open source, or I should say public domain books and audio books, and LibriVox and Gutenberg project are two of my big passions, because I love reading that stuff. And they had an application, and I thought, hey, wow, there's this Linux application for Gutenberg. This is cool. There's a Linux application for LibriVox. Or maybe I created the LibriVox based on the Gutenberg idea that he had there. But this pretty much creates a simple application that takes a web page and creates it into an application form. It looks like it could be an application. It doesn't look like a web page anymore, and you can go right in there. If you look, for instance, let's say we look for Charles Dickens. Very simple. I can type it proper this time, and we can see like the Pickwick Papers, Hard Times, Martin Chuzzlewit, Nicholas Nickleby, Little Dorrit, the Old Curiosity Shop. From here you can click on them, and you can get those things in EPUB, HTML, Plucker. Man, I used to use Plucker all the time back in the old Palm OS days. That was my flavor. That was awesome to be able to read books in Plucker on the whole Palm OS. But you have all of that here for Gutenberg. Excellent resource for open domain. And then, of course, for LibriVox over here, they have taken open public domain books and set it up so that you can volunteer and read them, or you can listen to them. And it's just so cool, because if you go into the listening section and you search, you can find thousands of books in their catalog that people have taken the time to read and just have done an excellent job. Now, I know that's a side note, and I'm not being a commercial. It's just two things I really thought was cool, and I found that when you have when you have Chromium, you can create these little applications with a simple property in the application settings. And as we can see here, it's very simple. Chromium, of course, you throw that on there. --app equals your URL. If anybody's interested, I'll throw one of these in there. It gives you your window size. It talks about disabling the extension and disabling the dev tools, and it creates that cool little box. It's just really neat. If you have a web page that you always go to and you want to turn it into a window-esque application instead of a web page, it's a neat thing to do. Especially if you have kids, for instance, and you want to create an application, a web page that they can go to that you don't want them to get out of or search Google or maybe go somewhere else. You can create this as an application for them. Completely off the topic, but I just wanted to bring it up. SUSE has been great. I've enjoyed it. Like I said, I used it for many years, well over a decade ago. Still enjoy it now. It was kind of fun to review it again. Stable, strong. I don't know how well it would work on older PCs because GUI. KDE is a very heavy graphic interface. Takes up a lot of resources. I'm sure you could probably look to see about installing XFCE alongside it and boot into that instead. Everything else about it's been great. Enjoyed it. I won't keep up much more of your time. Let's take a quick look, see where we're at. We're at 19 and a half minutes. I gotta speed this up. I want this to be under 20 minutes. So whatever you're having, enjoy it. And thank you for watching. If you want to watch me on Twitter, or not watch me on Twitter, but look at the Twitter thing, I have been doing that lately. There's a link at the top of the screen. You can follow me. I don't have any followers. I'm just starting it. That's all there is. Thank you very much. Talk to y'all later. Bye.